My dad raised a glass in front of 14 people and said he wanted to appreciate the one person in the family who had made him truly proud. The room went quiet in the way it always did when he spoke. It wasn't just respect. It was expectation. Everyone knew something important was about to be said, something that would define the tone of the entire evening. Then he looked at my younger sister, Chloe. She was sitting to his right, exactly where she always sat during gatherings like this. Calm, composed, perfectly dressed. Her posture was straight, her smile soft, her eyes lowered just enough to look humble without actually missing any of the attention. He said she had just landed a job at Ardent Global. The reaction was immediate. People started congratulating her from every direction. My aunt leaned forward and grabbed her hand. My cousins started asking questions. My mother wiped her eyes like this was the proudest moment of her life. And Chloe just sat there, smiling like she had earned every second of it. Maybe she had, or maybe she hadn't. At that moment, no one was thinking about that. They were just thinking about what my dad wanted them to think, that she was the success. And then, like always, the second part came. He leaned back slightly and said there's a difference between people who stay focused and people who get distracted chasing things that don't lead anywhere. No one said anything, but I could feel it. The shift, the unspoken direction of the conversation. Then he added that some people take longer to figure out what being an adult really means. A few people laughed quietly, the kind of laugh that isn't meant to be funny, just safe. I didn't look up. I kept eating, because I already knew. I knew exactly what role I was playing in that moment. I was the contrast, the example, the quiet disappointment sitting at the same table. This wasn't new. This was years in the making. Chloe had always been the one who did everything right. She chose the right subjects, went to the right university, built the kind of path that made sense to people like my dad. Clear, structured, respectable, and me, I chose something else. Something he never really tried to understand. I told stories. Not fictional ones, not made-up characters, but real stories. The kind people go through every day but don't always know how to express. Stories about betrayal, family pressure, quiet revenge, emotional survival. I turned those stories into content, videos. At first, no one watched them. Then a few people did. Then more. And slowly, without anyone in my family really noticing, it started growing. But to my dad, it wasn't real, because it didn't fit into his idea of success. It didn't come with a company name he could mention proudly. It didn't sound impressive at dinner tables, so it didn't count. That night should have been like every other night. I should have stayed quiet, ignored it, finished my food and left. But something felt different. Not about my dad, not even about Chloe. It was about Ryan, her husband. Ryan was never quiet. He was the kind of person who liked being heard. Confident, talkative, always ready to jump into conversations. But that night, he was barely speaking. He kept shifting in his seat, tapping his fingers lightly against the table. Every time someone mentioned Chloe's job, he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He avoided looking at me. That was the first thing I noticed. Then the second. Every time someone asked Chloe a specific question about her job, she hesitated. Just for a second. Then Ryan would answer for her, quickly, smoothly, like he had already prepared for those questions. At first, it didn't seem like much, but then my mind started connecting things. The way Chloe had rushed the announcement of her job a week earlier. The way she changed the topic whenever I asked her about details. The way Ryan always stepped in at the right moment. And then I remembered something else. An email. One I wasn't supposed to see. It had come to me by accident. A forwarded thread from someone I knew online. At first, I didn't pay attention to the names. But then I saw the company, Ardent Global, and I saw the attachment. A portfolio, flagged, for plagiarism. I didn't connect it immediately. But sitting at that table, watching Ryan avoid eye contact, watching Chloe carefully control every answer, it all came together. So instead of reacting the way everyone expected me to, I did something else. I asked a question. I looked at Ryan and said his name. He looked up like he had been pulled out of his thoughts. I asked him which company Chloe had gotten the job at. Chloe answered before he could. Too quickly. Ardent Global. I nodded slowly, like I was just confirming something. Then I asked if that company had started hiring candidates who submit fake portfolios. Everything stopped. The sound in the room disappeared. Ryan's face changed instantly. Chloe froze. My dad looked at me like I had just said something completely out of place. He asked me what kind of question that was, but I didn't answer him. I kept looking at Ryan, because his reaction was enough. He said he didn't know what I was talking about, but his voice gave him away. So I picked up my phone, opened the email, turned the screen toward him. I told him it was from Ardent Global. I said they had flagged Chloe's portfolio for plagiarism. I said they had attached the original creator's work as proof. Chloe whispered no, but it didn't sound like denial. It sounded like fear. Ryan tried to fix it. He said it was a misunderstanding, that companies make mistakes, that these things happen, but he was speaking too fast, too defensive. I told him I'm sure it was a misunderstanding, especially when someone edits timestamps, renames files, and hopes no one checks. That's when Chloe broke. She said she didn't think they would check. She said she just needed one chance. She said everyone else had connections and she didn't want to fall behind. She said it like she expected someone to understand, maybe even forgive her, but no one spoke. The room felt heavy, like something important had just been exposed and no one knew how to react to it. I looked at her and said quietly that it wasn't help. It was theft. My dad sat down slowly, like the energy had left his body. He kept saying it wasn't true, but his voice didn't have the same confidence anymore. For the first time, he didn't control the room. For the first time, he didn't know what to say. I stood up. Not angrily, not dramatically, just done. I told them I never had a problem with her success, only with the lies, and with being treated like I was nothing just because I chose a different path. Then I looked at my dad. I told him he always asked why I wasn't like her. I told him I was glad I wasn't. And then I walked out. The air outside felt different, quieter, lighter, but also heavier in a way I didn't expect. Because even though I had said what I needed to say, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like something had ended, something that had been building for years. I didn't go back inside that night. I just stood outside the house for a few minutes, letting the noise from inside fade into the background. I could still hear voices, but they were quieter now. Slower. Confused. For the first time, I wasn't part of that conversation. And honestly, I didn't want to be. I walked away without looking back. That night, I didn't get any calls, no messages. No one tried to stop me. Which, in a strange way, said more than anything else. Because if I had been wrong, if I had embarrassed them unfairly, someone would have reached out. But no one did. And that silence told me everything I needed to know. The next morning felt different. Not peaceful. Not exactly heavy either. Just clear. For years, I had lived inside this constant pressure of being compared, judged, measured against someone else's definition of success. And suddenly, that pressure was gone. Not because things were fixed, but because something had finally broken. And once something breaks like that, it can't go back to what it was. Later that afternoon, my phone started buzzing. First, it was my cousin, then my aunt, then another number I didn't recognize. I ignored all of them. I wasn't ready to explain anything, because for years, no one had asked for my side of the story. And now, suddenly, everyone was curious. It didn't feel genuine. It felt like they just wanted details, drama, something to talk about. By evening, I finally got a message from my mother. She didn't call, she just texted. "Come home, we need to talk." I stared at the message for a long time, then I locked my phone. I wasn't going back. Not yet. That night, I sat in my room and opened my laptop. For a few minutes, I just stared at the screen. Then I started typing. Not for my family, not to explain myself, but for my audience. I wrote the story, not with names, not with exact details, but with the truth, the feeling, the moment, the silence at the table, the question, the way everything changed in seconds. I didn't rush it. I let it come out slowly, naturally, the way real stories do. When I finished, I turned it into a video. Simple visuals, soft background music. My voice steady, calm, controlled. I didn't exaggerate anything. I didn't need to, because the truth was already powerful enough. I uploaded it late that night. No big expectations, no strategy, just honesty. And then I went to sleep. The next morning I woke up to notifications, a lot of them, more than usual. I opened the video. It had already crossed 10,000 views. That wasn't normal. Not that fast. Comments were pouring in. People were sharing their own stories, talking about family pressure, comparison, being overlooked, being underestimated. By afternoon, it hit 50,000. By evening, 100,000. And it kept going. But that wasn't the part that affected me the most. It was the messages. People saying they felt seen, that they had gone through the same thing, that they never had the courage to speak up the way I did. For the first time, I realized something clearly. What I had been building all this time mattered. Even if my family didn't understand it, even if my dad never acknowledged it, it was real. 2 days later, my mom called again. This time I picked up. Her voice sounded tired, different. She didn't start with anger. She didn't defend anyone. She just said, "You should come home." I asked her why. There was a pause. Then she said, "Things are not good here." I didn't ask for details. I already knew. Something like that doesn't just disappear. It spreads. It settles. It changes how people see each other. Later that evening, I got a message from Chloe. It was short. "I didn't think you'd do that." I read it twice. Then I replied, "I didn't think you'd do that either." She didn't respond. The next few days were quiet, but not the kind of quiet that feels calm. The kind that feels like something is happening, just not in front of you. Then, slowly, things started coming out. The job offer wasn't just at risk. It was gone. Ardent Global had withdrawn it. They didn't want to deal with the situation. They didn't want the risk. And Chloe knew it was coming. That's why she rushed the announcement. That's why she avoided questions. That's why Ryan kept stepping in. Ryan tried to fix things. He reached out to people, tried to explain it as a misunderstanding. But it didn't work. Because once something like that is flagged, it stays. At home, things got worse. My dad stopped talking about it completely, which for him was unusual. He always had something to say, an opinion, a judgment. But now, nothing. My mom tried to keep things normal, but you can't go back to normal after something like that. Chloe barely left her room. She stopped answering calls, stopped posting online, stopped pretending everything was fine. And maybe for the first time, she had to face what it felt like to not be perfect. A week later, my video crossed 500,000 views, then 1,000,000, then more. Opportunities started coming in. Brand deals, collaborations, requests for more content. The thing I had been quietly building for years was finally visible. And the strange part, no one from my family mentioned it, not once, not even my mom. It was like two completely different realities were happening at the same time. One where I was finally being recognized, and one where everything at home was falling apart. Then one night, my dad called. I stared at the screen for a few seconds. Then I answered. He didn't speak immediately. Neither did I. Finally, he said my name, just my name, no anger, no authority, just quiet. He asked if I could come over. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just said, "Why?" There was a long pause. Then he said something I didn't expect. "I think we need to talk properly." And for the first time in years, he sounded like someone who wasn't in control. I didn't go to my father's house immediately after that call. I waited, not because I was afraid, but because for the first time in my life, I didn't feel rushed to respond to him. In the past, every call from him meant urgency, pressure, expectation, but now it felt different. He didn't sound angry, he didn't sound proud either. He sounded unsure, and that was new. 2 days later, I finally went. The house looked the same from the outside, same gate, same walls, same silence in the neighborhood. But the moment I stepped inside, I could feel it. Something had changed, not in the structure, in the atmosphere. It felt heavier, slower, like the house itself was processing what had happened. My mother opened the door. She looked at me for a second without speaking. Then she stepped aside. No smile, no questions, just space. That alone told me everything. I walked into the living room. My father was sitting there, not at the head of the room like usual. Not in control of anything, just sitting. For a moment, neither of us spoke. It was the kind of silence that used to make me uncomfortable, but not anymore. He finally looked at me and said, "Sit." I did, slowly, no tension. No resistance, just calm. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then he said, "I watched your video." I nodded. "I know," I said. Another pause. He leaned back slightly, like he was trying to find the right way to say something he had never practiced before. "I didn't understand it at first," he said. I stayed quiet. He continued, "I thought it was just content, just stories." I looked at him. "It is just stories," I said, "but they're real." That line stayed in the air for a moment. He looked down. That was something I had never seen before. My father didn't look down, not in conversations, not in arguments, not ever, but now he did. "I didn't know what you were building," he said finally. I replied, "You never asked." Silence again, not defensive, not emotional, just truth sitting between us. He nodded slowly, like he had expected that answer, like part of him already knew it. After a moment, he said something else. "Chloe is not doing well." I didn't react immediately. I already knew that too, but hearing it from him made it real in a different way. He continued, "She hasn't been leaving her room much." I nodded slightly. "I know." He looked at me again. This time, not like a father speaking to a child, more like a person trying to understand another person. "I thought I was motivating you," he said. "I thought I was pushing you in the right direction." I stayed quiet because I understood what he meant, but I also understood what it had done. Finally, I said, "You weren't motivating me." I paused. "You were comparing me." That sentence hit differently, even in silence. He didn't respond immediately. Then he said, "I didn't realize the difference." I nodded. "But I lived it." For the first time, there was no interruption, no correction, no defense, just listening. After a long pause, he said something I didn't expect. "I watched your audience react to your video." I looked at him. He continued, "The things they said I didn't understand at first." Another pause. "Then I realized they were describing you in a way I never did." That line stayed in the room longer than anything else. He exhaled slowly. "I think I was wrong," he said, not loudly, not dramatically, just honestly. I didn't respond right away, because for years I had imagined this moment. Hearing him say something like that, but now that it was here, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like closure. I finally said, "I didn't need you to be perfect." I looked at him. "I just needed you to see me." That was the difference. Not success, not career, not comparison, just being seen. He nodded slowly. And for the first time, he didn't try to respond with logic. He didn't try to fix it. He just accepted it. A few days passed after that meeting. Things didn't magically become normal. They couldn't, but they became quieter, softer, more real. Chloe eventually started speaking again. Not much, but enough. Not confident like before, not performative, just human. And me? I kept building, not louder, not faster, just consistently. The audience kept growing. Messages kept coming. Stories kept being shared. One of my videos started gaining more attention than the others. It wasn't the most dramatic one. It wasn't the most emotional one. But it was the most honest. It was about being underestimated by your own family. About not fitting into someone else's idea of success. About finding value in something others don't understand. And strangely, my father watched that one too. He didn't say anything about it, but I knew, because sometimes silence is also a response. Weeks later, he called me again. This time, it wasn't heavy. It was simple. He asked how things were going. I told him. He listened. No interruption, no correction, just listening. Before ending the call, he said something small. "I'm trying to understand." I replied, "That's enough for now." And it really was. Because not every story ends with perfect forgiveness. Not every relationship resets. Some just shift. Slowly, quietly, in ways that don't look dramatic from the outside, but feel completely different on the inside. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't the comparison. I wasn't the disappointment. I was just me, and that was enough.